Good morning. So today I'm going to be making the counter argument against the claim that the no first use policy would have substantial benefits to the United States and the world. So the first secondary claim being that the no first use policy would restore checks and balances to the government, and the second claim being that the no first use policy would help ease the tensions between India and Pakistan. So in the first claim of checks and balances, it states that the Congress is largely bypassed by the current system that we have right now when it comes to nuclear weapons, and that the President could authorize nuclear launch at any moment that he decides to. And while the no first use policy wouldn't allow the President to immediately use nuclear weapons, it doesn't mean that it would stop him if other countries were to attack. So if another country were to attack the United States, the President could just as easily declare to use nuclear weapons as before. So the main reason that we don't adopt this policy, as stated by the ex-Chief of Defense William Perry on an interview by the National Public Radio on January 2018, is that we don't want to run the risk of losing our ICBMs. And basically the ICBMs are intercontinental ballistic missiles. So unfortunately we have a really big dependence on these ICBMs, that they could be the first thing to be targeted, and we wouldn't have any way of stopping it or using them if we adopted this policy. So while this no first use policy would help with miscalculations or wrong predictions made by the President, just if by any reason they were to accidentally launch these missiles by error, and then there wouldn't be any way for us to turn them around. So then a solution stated by William Perry on that same interview would be that basically we would just need to ride out an attack if we adopted this policy, or we should change our deterrence forces so that we only have submarines and airplanes. So basically the idea behind only having submarines and airplanes would be that unlike ICBMs, submarines and airplanes would be capable of returning back just in case that the President made any mistakes. And unlike ICBMs, ICBMs would basically just target location, and there would be no way to cancel them or make them turn around. So the next claim for the no first use policy would be that it would ease the tensions between India and Pakistan. So then currently right now, the only places that have the no first use policy are China and India. And then the main argument is that if the United States adopted this policy, then maybe the rest of the world may follow, and there will be no need to rely on nuclear weapons. However, at the moment, this isn't something that's really possible. So according to an article by BBC News, the United States has somewhere around 6,800 nuclear weapons, and countries such as India have 130, and Pakistan has around 140, which are some of the lowest numbers when it comes to nuclear weapons. So in another article by The Atlantic, it is stated that countries that contemplate or introduce the no first use policy are almost always strong states that enjoy a conventional weapons edge. So then other smaller countries are basically not as, that aren't as strong, aren't likely to adopt this policy because they fear of being attacked by another bigger, stronger country. And then basically they would have no other way to retaliate unless it came to allies. But obviously there's really no country that wants to be attacked first, so that's mainly the main reason that they don't adopt this no first use policy, because just in case that they were to be attacked, they want to be the first ones to engage, so that way if they were attacked first, they would have no other way to retaliate. So even if the United States were to adopt this policy, there is no saying that the other countries will follow. Currently for Japan, the United States' high stockpile of weapons is actually an effective deterrent when it comes to attacks from other enemies, because of the fear of the retaliation that the United States could bring afterwards. So one of the biggest fears was that for Japan was that if the United States were to adopt this policy, it would make other countries more likely to want to attack, because then they could attack first. Even though the United States could retaliate, that means that they were open to attacks first, and then they, like I said, countries don't want to be the first ones to get attacked. So then, if the United States were to adopt this policy, there's reason to believe that India could entirely abandon its no first use policy, because not having the presence of the United States behind their back, or just the presence of the United States overall, might affect them, scare them into going into full offensive by being attacked by Pakistan first and being wiped out. So while there are some benefits to the no first use policy, the also know the United States is currently what's keeping other countries in check from its allies. And another, this policy could lead to other countries not following in fear that the enemy countries could strike first. Thank you.
Okay, well, you lay out the advocates' arguments pretty clearly with the two secondary points. On the first point, you kind of agree that there is a process by which Congress gets bypassed currently. I'm not sure that you're answered on this that suggests that, well, if we were attacked, then the same thing could happen. Well, if we were attacked, I'm not exactly sure that that would be a first use. If we were attacked with nukes, it would be a response. So how that applies to your argument was not very clear. The evidence from Perry, I think, is pretty effective explaining why it is that we don't want to engage in this, because the ICBMs create part of the deterrent that we have. It's part of what they call the nuclear triad. You mentioned, we have ICBMs that are land-based, we have those that are on airplanes, and we have those that are in submarines. And the idea is that if you have each part of the triad, like a tripod, you are defended, but if something goes off, then if the ground-based ones were eliminated, we'd still have the other two to respond. And the idea here is that this would basically render the land-based ones useless or make them vulnerable to targeting. Okay, I think that there's an argument there. I think it needs to be developed a little bit more. The truth of the matter is that the likelihood of being targeted first by some other power with their nuclear weapons is probably relatively minimal. So how big a risk that is, I'm not sure. On the other hand, the argument that usually gets made here is that it's the mere presence of all of those nuclear weapons that creates a deterrent that keeps people from engaging that sort of behavior. That's the point that you're making later on when you're talking about Japan and India in response to what would happen if the U.S. were to adopt such a policy. And on that second point, where the India-Pakistan issue comes up, I thought you had some interesting data about the number of nukes. Who the U.S.'s ally is in this situation, or which side we would be defending? That's a little bit unclear. India and Pakistan seem to be relatively equivalent in the amount of nuclear weapons that they have. What would provoke either side into utilizing it was not quite clear, but you did suggest that India might feel that they needed to preemptively attack because they were fearful of maybe the instability in Pakistan or something along those lines, and figured that if the United States is unwilling to act, that they need to. I think that's the argument that you're making. That's a reasonable point, that it in fact might create greater instability because our partners or other nuclear powers would feel a stronger need to act prematurely if we are going to be reticent to act. I think that that's an interesting point and could be developed as an argument a little bit more. There's not really much discussion of the advocates' evidence and reasoning. It's mostly counterclaims that you're presenting here, and I thought that the counterclaims on the first point were okay, and the one on the second point needs to be developed a little bit more, but it's a good idea. All right, thank you.